Joining me now to discuss, former Green Beret and author of Nobody is Coming to Save You, Scott Mann. Scott, great to have you here today.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk about this first phase of the ceasefire set to end March 2nd, but now Israel's decision to withhold the prisoners to put an end to those ceremonies Hamas holds when they actually release the hostages, which is threatening to keep that ceasefire deal from entering phase 2. So what would happen if they can't keep this deal together? And is this a point that Israel should be standing on regarding these ceremonies that Hamas has been having?
Well, I'm probably less qualified to answer the first point just because I'd be speculating, and I think Israel's going to retain the right to strike the way they need to here. But what I would say is that when you look at just the games that have been played, Alex, with the release of the Israeli prisoners after all that they've been through, after such a violation of law of land warfare that happened on October 7th, and then to add that at the end, I have to ask myself, what would American leaders do in a situation like that? What would we do if our hostages had been held for that long, treated that way, and then paraded that way and humiliated that way in front of the world? What would we ask of our leaders, and what would our leaders do? I think that's where we start on a question like this, because I have to think it would be a pretty rough response.
Yeah, I'm not sure the United States leaders would put up with it, frankly. I'm glad you posed that hypothetical. But it is interesting when you think about, do you really want to make that stand when, in the end, hostages are being released back into your care? But beyond that, let's talk about this constant threat of a resumed war hanging over these negotiations. The potential actually could happen at any moment, really, realistically speaking. So what impact is it having on both sides here? Is there one that fears that possibility more than the other?
Well, I think they both fear it. I think any nation state that doesn't fear the level of conflict that's happening right now is almost deluded. But I think that what you see, at least from what I can tell in terms of Israel and in the way that they come about this or come across this, is that there's no discernible change in the Hamas or Hezbollah posture here. Just the egregious actions that they took with those hostages, I think sends a pretty clear message that they still have every intention of wiping Israel off the earth. And when you see the near miss with the bus explosions just in the recent hours, I think that's what Israel has to figure into their calculus, is that has there been any substantive change? And I don't think that there has. And again, I go back to, how would we respond to that if we were dealing with a terror threat, which, by the way, we very well could? How would we respond to that? How did we respond after 9/11? My God, a 20-year war. So, my thinking here is that, yeah, it is definitely a powder keg, but I just don't see any discernible change in these violent extremist groups that would cause Israel to behave differently.
Speaking of the word powder keg, I want to bring up a next question that we had, which is the fact that Israel is in possession of over 2,000 pounds of bombs, so they say. They said that they want to eradicate Hamas. Can you put that into perspective for us? Is that a lot? Is it enough to eradicate Hamas?
That's a tough question. I think what Israel is in possession of is just a systemic capability across multiple fronts to eradicate Hamas over time. I don't think it's any one poundage of explosives or anything like that. I think, what Israel has been able to do is very good intelligence, followed by very, very surgical strikes that we've seen, even across borders, that enable them to lop the head off the snake. I think what remains to be seen is, can you do something with this multi-decade ideology that foments such a degree of hatred that entire swaths of people are wanting to push another demographic into the sea? Like, that remains to be seen. But I do think Israel has tremendous capability across multiple fronts, and right. I think even just doing it organically, I think they could decimate.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.